animal now extinct, and you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past, and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses, and we are running out of time.
Show us your...
Welcome to the West Asia Post. I'm Raisha Saigal, and we're back with another episode of a weekly special. Today, we will discuss the emerging rifts in Israel's war cabinet, how Netanyahu and Gazans tension can impact the Israeli strategy. We also talk about the struggles of staying connected in Gaza. There's lots more lined up for you on the show today, but first, the headlines.
Israeli military says troops that killed 3 hostages mistook their cries as Hamas militants. Adds the assumed cries to be a trap to draw them into ambush and acted in the best of their understanding. Turkish president says there is no difference between Netanyahu and Hitler as Israel steps up attacks on Gaza. Lebanon's Hezbollah accuses Israel of hacking into CCTV cameras installed outside homes and shops in southern Lebanon, and urges residents there to take the device offline. Accusations come amid escalations on the border. Not enough aid is entering the besieged Gaza Strip, warns the United Nations body. 40% of the population is at risk of famine as Israel hinders the flow of much-needed aid into the enclave. Iranian judiciary-affiliated news agency Gazans says Iran executed 4 saboteurs linked to Israel's Mossad intelligence service. Israeli strike hits a residential building near the Kuwaiti hospital in Gaza's southern Rafah city. At least 20 Palestinians killed.
The Israel-Gaza war will soon enter its 4th month. Over 22,000 people have been killed in the conflict since October 7th. And despite international calls to tone down its assault, Israel has promised to intensify its war on Hamas. And the first report gets you the highlights of the ongoing war. enemy at 7 fronts. Another battle is emerging for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. There is rising public dissent and friction with the defense minister as well. His allies are also getting vocal against Israel's strategy in Gaza. The question being, will these factors alter Netanyahu's approach to the war? Our next report explains.
Israel is fighting a battle on 7 fronts. That grim declaration by the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, this week did not only refer to battles on geographical borders, but also with Iran and Hamas backers across the region.
We are in a multi-arena war. We are being attacked from 7 different sectors: Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Judea and Samaria, Iraq, Yemen and Iran. We have already responded and taken action of these sectors, and I say here in the most explicit way, anyone who acts against us is a potential target. There is no immunity for anyone.
Gallant warned that anyone who acted against Israel will have to pay the price. He also stopped short of saying on which fronts Israel had acted upon. Outside the borders of Israel, another front is simmering from within. The Israeli population is increasingly showing its discontent over the Netanyahu government's approach on Gaza. They want the hostages to be brought back and the missiles to stop raining on Gaza.
We are asking them to stop the war, to focus on bringing the civilians home that they were supposed to protect.
We're actually asking from them to create another hostage return, to create another deal so that we can get everyone back. There's no one that should be left there.
But Netanyahu and his war cabinet have refused to budge on Gaza, despite the domestic and international pressure, and have even threatened to intensify their campaign. Behind closed doors, their ongoing talks have featured potential ceasefire deals. Israel's negotiators in Europe held talks on a possible truce, but as soon as they returned home, something else was brewing. Netanyahu and Gallant have been in the government for a long time together. They've also had their fair share of friction. There are reports emerging that Bibi has barred his defense minister from holding meetings and discussing details of hostage talks with Mossad chief David Barnea in his absence. On at least 2 occasions, Gallant reportedly invited Barnea for meetings. After this, he received messages from Netanyahu's office that the premier disapproved of such talks. The Prime Minister's office said in response to the report that there were no such limitations on Gallant or Barnea. It also added that the War Cabinet is the only body that outlines policy and decides on the hostages, and there is no exception for anyone. In front of the cameras, both leaders say that they are working in step during the ongoing war. But the cracks in their relationship were on display on a handful of occasions. Reports indicated that Gallant pressed heavily to have the IDF launch a major campaign against Hezbollah in the initial days of the war. Netanyahu opposed and ultimately buried the idea. Earlier this year, Netanyahu fired Gallant for expressing public disapproval of his government's rush to pass a contentious judicial overhaul bill. Gallant's sacking set off a public uproar with protests and violent outrage. It forced Prime Minister to quietly retract his decision and leave Gallant at his post.
The war in West Asia has spilled over to one of the world's busiest trade routes. American missiles and Houthi drones have been in action over the Red Sea. The question being, will the US be able to contain the Yemeni threat to the route, or will it end up escalating tensions in the already boiling region?
Half of the container ships that regularly transited the Red Sea and Suez Canal are now avoiding the route. The Houthi threat in the Red Sea has redrawn the commercial route around Africa. Called the Cape of Good Hope, the route takes 25% more time to transport the goods compared to the Red Sea passage. Expectedly, shipping costs have surged. The spike in product costs includes all things, from food grains to your favorite sneakers. As Israel keeps bombarding Gaza in a show of support to Hamas, Yemen's Houthi rebels have threatened to attack all Israel-bound ships passing through the Bab el-Mandeb. Making good their threat, this week too the Houthis targeted the Liberia-flagged MSC United.
The naval forces of the Yemeni armed forces, with God's help, carried out an operation targeting a commercial ship, MSC United, using appropriate naval missiles. The operation to target the ship took place after its crew refused for the third time the calls of the naval forces and repeated warning shots.
Presenting a firm international response to the Houthi threat, earlier this month, US President Joe Biden launched a new maritime force, Operation Prosperity Guardian. The Pentagon said the force will operate as a defensive coalition of over 20 nations. It is expected to ensure safe movement of goods worth billions of dollars through the Red Sea. But less than a week after the announcement, nations are more and more reluctant to link themselves with the Red Sea force. Italy said it will send a ship to the Red Sea only at the request of Italian ship owners, and it will not be part of the US operation fleet. France also said it supports efforts to secure freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, but that its ships will remain under French command. Spain was more blunt. Its Prime Minister said Madrid will not be part of the maritime force and that it even opposes using the EU anti-piracy fleet to counter the Houthi threat.
We believe that Operation Atlanta does not have the characteristics, nor is it the nature of the operation required and needed in the Red Sea. In Atlanta, what we are doing is operating in the Indian Ocean. What we are doing there is fighting a particular phenomenon of piracy, and in the Red Sea the situation is completely different. The risk is different and the nature of the challenge is different.
For countries that are part of the force, contributions can range from dispatching warships to even sending a single staff officer. And even such loose terms, many nations have not made their intention or contribution clear. In the region itself, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have distanced themselves from the OPG. One reason is that countries do not want to risk becoming a Houthi target. Secondly, the forces linked to the Israeli operation in Gaza, that is a deal breaker for the European leaders who have expressed their reservations about Netanyahu's strategy in Gaza. Their voters have been strident in their calls for a ceasefire, and even a hint support the Israeli siege could cost the leaders their votes. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Power cuts and internet outages have left millions of Gazans disconnected from the world. In these desperate times, people are embracing the old and the new. Radio sets are sold out and ESIMs are in high demand. Our next report tells you how people in the besieged strip are staying in touch with the world.
Besieged, relentlessly bombed, and disconnected from the world.
גם אותה החבורה הכניסה לסרט, כמעין מחווה לעולם הולך ונעלם בשטף המידע.
Gazans are finding refuge in radios and ESIMs. Ever since the Israeli assault began, most of the Gazan infrastructure has been reduced to rubble. Power cuts are a part of daily life, and so is the lack of network on phones. Before the war began, Mahmoud Mehdi Daoudi would not have imagined all his radio sets would have sold out. But since October 7th, the frequency sets and any old device that comes with a radio is sold out in Gaza.
Some wanted to take radios, they couldn't find any, so they bought cheap old phones. Instead of having a modern phone, they buy one for about 25 euros. The phone is for listening to the radio, not making calls.
For the displaced residents facing constant bombardment, the radio broadcasts help them know which areas are under aerial attack and when to be on the move again.
There's no electricity, no internet and no communication. People want to listen to the news to find out where the bombs are.
Before the war, a radio cost around $7. Now they've almost doubled in price. New stocks are impossible to order given the limited humanitarian aid that is trickling in. Despite the short supply, the good old radio is helping Gazans stay informed. On the other side, there are some people in the strip who have switched to a more modern but expensive technology. ESIMs are a godsend for people in Gaza. The idea behind them is simple. They're a software version of the chips traditionally inserted into phones to connect cellular networks and the internet. Embedded directly into a device, they can be activated using a QR code that Gaza residents receive from family members living abroad. The users can then connect in roaming mode to a foreign network, often an Israeli one or sometimes Egyptian. While the cards help offset telecom outages, internet access is required to activate them in the first place.
أكثر فئة بتستخدم الإيسم اللي هم ممكن يكون الصحفيين بسبب نقل الصورة الصحيحة إلى العالم الخارجي تظل إنه الاحتلال عمل.
It's mostly journalists who use eSIM cards to convey the real picture to the world, especially that the occupation has deliberately sought to conceal what's taking place in the Gaza Strip. There are also medics and civil defense employees who seek to know the exact location of strikes to help people, in addition to UNRWA employees who needed to organize aid convoys and also those who want to communicate with relatives and holders of foreign passports.
من أجل توجيه البضائع والأشياء هاي إلى الأماكن الصحيح والمساعدات.
But the eSIMs also come with their challenges. The service is only available in areas near the border with Israel. If you're somewhere far, then the best bet is to climb up onto the roof to get a network signal.
We try to put more than one eSIM in the mobile phone because when we use up the internet in the SIM card or if it breaks down, we can use the other card immediately. This mobile phone can take up to 9 eSIM cards, and when one card runs out, we can use the other.
Human Rights Watch has raised concern over telecom outages in Gaza. It says the disruptions can provide cover for atrocities while further undermining humanitarian efforts.
There is a new staple on Turkish dinner tables. The fruity bubbly is a hit this holiday season. Our next report tells you all about the trending spirit, its history and the Turkish liquor tradition.
It's the newest hot seller, whose supplies are failing to keep pace with the surging sales. This is not a new viral product. The Turkish fizzy wine is the toast of the town in the holiday season. The Turkish bubbly is a dinner table favorite. Winemakers say sales are so high that they're not sure they can deliver New Year's orders on time. In Turkey, a booming wine market was unheard of till recent years. But now, in a space once occupied by Italian Proseccos and French champagnes, the Turkish bubbly, the assassin, is making a mark. The assassin is made from a local variety of grapes. Interestingly, this variety almost died out 4 decades ago. After being rediscovered, it has proliferated. Today, 800 indigenous grape varieties are used to make wine in Turkey. Winkara was the first Turkish winery to produce sparkling wine in 2006. It uses the traditional champagne method, with grapes picked from vines in the small town of Kalishik. Demand for the wine soon picked up, and a market opened for producers and sellers.
First of all, wine has been produced here for centuries. We believed in the potential for wine production here and planted vineyards in 2003 and collected our first harvest in 2006.
The Turkish fizzy glory didn't find favor with winemakers with an international taste at first. But experts say one sip was enough to evaporate all their prejudice.
Especially since the beginning of the 2000s, since 2005 and 2006, there have been positive developments in quality wine and sparkling wine production. The main reason is that investors outside the wine sector are entering the industry. It is an essential factor.
Turkish wines are now garnering all overseas clientele too. Assassin is getting seen and sold in the US. But despite the growing popularity, the international market still needs to grow. In 2022, only 30 litres of Turkish sparkling wines were exported. The industry at home too is facing challenges. President Erdogan and his Islamo-conservative government has imposed heavy taxes to discourage drinking. In his 2 decades in power, Recep Tayyip Erdogan has tightened laws on the liquor industry. But wine producers are confident. They say despite the high taxes, they still have a high margin. The biggest hope is the country's youth, that's equally interested and curious about wines and high spirits.
That is all that we have on this episode of the West Asia Post. We will be back next week with a brand new lineup. Till then, keep watching WION World is One for all the latest global news updates.
Israel woke up to a barrage of thousands of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
Hostilities have broken out between Israel and Palestine, and the tensions that had been gathering steam over the course of the last several weeks and months.
The siren has gone off. I don't know if you can hear in the background what's going on. I'm going into the shelter now. So it's a very, very serious situation here across Israel. It's a state of emergency.
The United States stands with Israel.
Well, we are starting this broadcast with a developing story from West Asia, where Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Hamas has launched a war against the state of Israel.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world. We do the difficult part.
This weapon has been banned, but the US, Ukraine and Russia do not find the bombs problematic.
We also tell you why what's happening.
New drug is making a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's. This medicine helps slow down a patient's cognitive decline.
We look beyond the text. We give you context.
Is China preparing for a war in the Himalayas? And tonight, we come to you with some proof.
Hypocrisy is stunning.
Do leaders mean what they say? Do they ever say what they mean? To find out how real news affects you, your decisions,
Just when Iran took one step in the right direction, its moral police is planning to drag it further back. And once again, the victim will be women.
Watch Gravitas.
Welcome and thanks for tuning in.
We don't impose our views.
Did India threaten to ban Twitter? Either that or Jack Dorsey is lying to you.
That is Gravitas. We let life breathe through our show. Gravitas, the informed show for an intelligent audience.
Hello, welcome to This World. Vladimir Amelyan joins us from Kiev, and he is currently on the front line.